Hi all. Full room. Wow, thanks. It's really an honor to speak here in front of all of you. As Marcus said, I'm Raluca. Nice to meet you. How are y'all doing? Good? So before I introduce myself, I'd like to know a bit about all of you. So by raise of hands, who here is a tester? Okay, never got that response before. Who here works in Scrum, Agile? Okay. In a team with developers? Okay. And I'm assuming I don't have to ask everyone does automation, so I'm just going to skip that question. So a bit about myself. As Marcus said, I've been in software a long, long time. I started as a .NET developer, believe it or not, and kind of got a change of careers like 7 years ago. I'm really like a back-end person. I know it's something you shouldn't say at a Selenium conference, but we'll see how that goes. And back then, you didn't quite find too many roles as a back-end person specifically, and a friend of mine who's actually organizing now Romania testing days has said, oh, I have a job for you, a tester. I don't know what testers do. I tested my own code, but who knows? And it was in Java. I hadn't studied Java since university. And I said, okay, let's go for it. And I've done that for about 4 or 5 years. And now I'm currently managing 2 teams, going on 3, so 12, 18 people now. It's a bit of a challenge, but I still like to do at least a hands-on testing when I can, and just guide the testers around continuous delivery and automation. So a couple of things of when I joined back in 2011, our company was 120. For those of you who don't know, this is part of like the PaddyPowerBetfair group. I'm not sure how many of you kind of gamble or bet. But here, there's some subsidiaries like FanDuel, if you've heard about it, Draft, TVG in New Jersey. But don't ask me for any betting tips, because I work on the e-commerce side of things, so things like registering players, logging in, funding their accounts, and stuff like that. So as I said, when I first joined, we were about 120 in our office in Cluj. Now we're about 700, so the team grew quite a lot. In our team, we kind of had 4 or 5, in technology, 4 or 5 Scrum teams in Cluj at that time. People were doing automation in bits and pieces when I joined, right? So as a former developer coming into that role, my first project was a manual testing one. Go figure. It was good to be that way just because it was throwaway. It didn't really matter to invest in having automation for it. But then we started kind of going towards service-oriented architecture or microservices. And when starting that, we always wanted to start it with automation, right? And I was asking people, so, okay, you've done automation for this project. How did you do it? Oh, well, I've copy and pasted some classes from one project to another, and then I've spent 3 days fixing the compilation issues. And I'm like, that doesn't really work for me. And there were multiple teams working like in the same code base, same automation project. They were covering multiple components. You never knew which test needed to be run for which project. There was no documentation. You had like a bunch of tests and like, hope they all pass. I don't know what they all do. And, for me, coming from like an organized mindset, it was like, no, this is something that we kind of need to change. So obviously, we had some problems back then. Besides people doing automation for their ongoing project, there was this massive project called QA Automation Depth. Who's ever heard of that one before? And there was this team sitting somewhere in the corner who automated some scripts somebody else gave them. They had no knowledge of the product. They only had knowledge of automation. They were contractors at the time. And even though all our software was in Java mostly, they automated in .NET. And by the time they were done, they handed us a project. We never knew how to start. You know, we hadn't had the keys. We weren't given any demos. This was like a massive investment that just failed, to be honest. So besides that, we had a couple of problems with our own components, right? We had a bunch of automation tests we can't run. We have to release. And we did manual testing, and releases took a long, long time. Yeah. So we wanted to have more test coverage, right? It was sort of the case of you didn't know how much coverage you had just because everything was spread out across multiple things. And there were some monolithic components, and then there was starting microservices, and you never knew what tests to run. And you know, many manual tests were not documented. So we wanted to have this for once. Then we, of course, because we didn't have good tests, we didn't have enough tests, we had a lot of P1s, P2s in production. And as you all know, like, it's not the fact that there's a P1, P2 and you haven't caught it, is the fact that you're impacting the business. And business came back and said, well, you're having downtime for our clients and you're having P1s, P2s, and no one has confidence in you to release. And that was one of the things why releases took a long time. We had like 5 sign-offs before a release, like, is it a goal build? Did the test manager sign off? Did the performance manager sign off? Did the release manager sign off? We did like those drills with the release steps. It took us a whole day to release a component. And I'm like, we need to be faster, and we need to do it and not have these defects, right? And then, coupled with that, business also came back and said, well, our competitors are outrunning us. They're delivering things faster to the market, and it's you know, the gambling market is really reactive market. It's not about just doing things like for fun, but it's also a market where like various regulatory bodies, you know, governments give you rules to operate in their countries, and you can't operate until you implement those. And the faster you implement those and test and you're out there, the faster it is you get revenue. So that world is always changing, and we always have to find ways to get into new markets, so therefore you have to adapt your product to that specific market. And these are some crazy rules, I'm telling you. So like I think now, I can probably, it's safe to say, right now, Italy was the worst. I'm not sure when the US will have to be regulated on this. Like, Italy was the worst, but now Sweden is coming with these outrageous requirements. And yeah, if you're not fast, you can't really, it takes you a year to get into the market, all your competitors are there. And it was the time where like things like continuous integration appeared, continuous delivery, and everyone was like, buzzwords, let's do it. Like, how are you going to do continuous delivery if you don't have automated tests to have in your pipeline? That's not called continuous delivery, that's called continuous deployment. And you can't go out there and tell you, oh, I have continuous delivery. No, you don't. No, we don't. And that was a challenge for us. And they said, okay, let's increase the pace, but let's not lose the quality. Okay, so what do? There's a solution, and it's not alcohol, although copious amounts might have been involved in the creation of the solution. You know, when I joined, as I said, I was a developer in a former life. You know, that mindset kept going on. I was like, and I'm sort of a lazy person, so I don't like to write too much code if I can achieve something by one line. And I went to the developers in my team and said, okay, we can't just copy and paste whole files from one project to another. If we want to have our monolithic components done and broken into pieces and going through microservices, we can't do that every time we create a new service. It's not feasible to have like your account creation, your logins. You have to have users or your tests, right? And I was not going to have hard-coded user tests, not something I like to do. And let's find a way of actually fixing this. Let's have a common code or somewhere, because everyone's doing the same thing, only in different ways. People had SOAP UI calls in text strings, executing with HTTP clients in their Java code. It was like this massive, a whole class just to create an account, and you couldn't follow it, and when it broke, and you didn't know where to start. So I'm like, okay, no, this is not happening. And we got together with the developers and said, okay, for me, I would say, let's create the tests on the same platform and in the same way we create our code. It makes sense. It's easy to use. You can always ask for help. People know how to help you. If you do it .NET or Python or whatever and you don't have experts in that field, who's going to help you? The internet in Stack Overflow can only help you so much. And we said, okay, so we're creating our applications in Java, we're using Spring, and we said, well, let's use that for our testing framework, right? And we started to create this framework. I call it a toolkit. Most people have said it's a framework. I don't know. It's evolved into sort of a project on it itself, where we encapsulated all these things like user creation. You have to have money, you have to have session, you have to have users for, as I've mentioned, every jurisdiction you're out there. So you have Italian users, Spanish users, Swedish users, UK users, because there's different particularities and different things that you need to create. You know, like you need to capture their social security number or whatever else their government wants to have, like their shoe size and stuff like that. And we kind of only started to use it in our own tests at the beginning. Okay, so we did a new microservices. We said, okay, plug and play. Plug it in, use it in your test, get the method, create an account. And we didn't want to use like SOAP calls or REST calls. We wanted to, in a way, because as I've said, I'm a backend person, I wanted to use that service as our internal clients use that service, which makes sense because there are so many things you can diagnose with this as well. So we made it, as I've said, Java, Spring, and also we have like this internal, I think now it's an external open source, but I'm not sure everyone else is using it. We just like to call it external. Like a framework on top of Jetty, which is, it's called Cougar, which is the way they develop the microservices, and we use that in the test to create like the clients to call those services. And we started using it in our tests. It was really great for us as a team. And then other teams came to us because we are like at the core of business and asked us, well, I need a user. Everyone came. I need an Italian user. Well, instead of creating it and giving it to them, we were like, why don't you use this framework and have it in your automation, and you can create how many Italian users you need. And that started to catch on a little bit with the teams around us, but then we kind of hit a wall with other teams on not wanting it to use. They just wanted to be given stuff, not to actually do stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's been a while to actually, we started about 6 years ago, and it's still going, and it's been still used in the projects, but we actually had to push it like you would like your internal project as well. And we've done so many modifications to it, but it really has worked for us as a solution. So obviously, while doing this, we've learned a couple of things here and there. So what we did good on from the very beginning is that for us, it was a problem having so many integration environments, right? You have your dev, you have your QA, you have your integration, you have your post-production. And always there was difficulty for people to have users in every of those environments. So we created the library in such a way that everyone can just plug and play a property file for that specific environment with like service endpoints, and he was up and running. Because sometimes we got requests of, oh, you need to do a sanity test of this service on that environment. And with your manual test, you were like, Okay, I need the endpoints. I need to create users. What state is that database on? Can I actually run it? Do I have all the dependencies? Yada, 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 and they were needing it like, I need it yesterday. Well, you can't have it yesterday because I just can't plug and play my manual tests to work it in every environment. With the automation one, we actually, because we had that problem, we thought of the solution when we created the framework. And it was like I said to the developer, so because my Java was a bit rusty at that point, I was like, I need to be able to run this in our integration environment, in our post-production environment. How can you make it easier for a tester just to switch, if they have all the configs, just switch an environment. Works in this one, works in that one. You don't have hard-coded users. You're creating them every time. I know some might argue that's a waste, but it's just something that worked for us. And just to have that, it actually empowered us to be able to give fast feedback over a deployment anywhere, and definitely helped us while integrating this into continuous delivery. Then, if this works, yeah. Sorry. Well, you get two to the price of one. As you know, with manual tests, and we still have manual tests, I'm not going to come up here and say we're having 100% automation because you'll all call me a liar. But the tests that we chose to automate, they stayed automated. And the way we did it, it required really minimal refactoring or really minimal maintenance for them. Because they were on so often in their continuous delivery, you would see a failure right away. And when we started, we had like 3 or 4 microservices. Now only in the Cluj location, we have around 120. So multiply the effort was required at the beginning to actually copy and paste and do manual tests by 120 and see that that was not scalable in any way, shape, or form. And also, what really was a good thing is that we got help and we worked together with the developers. And every time something failed in that library, I could go to a Java developer and say, okay, sit with me and let's debug this. Is it a Spring issue? Is it a config issue? Is it some code I wrote wrong? What is it? And also, because we spoke the same language, there was never an issue where, okay, we're behind in a sprint, and the developers pitched in and helped to actually write automation because we were speaking the same language. They knew the configs. They were using that we didn't have to teach them where the configs were, how do they work, where I'm keeping this, where I'm keeping that. They just went in, oh yeah, I know. Because, as you know, developers, and I've seen this, I think in various ways, they have their way of doing things like best practices and whatnot. And we didn't have that in our company in terms of automation. Everyone was keeping their property file somewhere else. You were having to work on another person's project. Okay, but wait, where do I find it? And now, by having that library, we kind of, I don't want to say forced, but we wanted to teach people, okay, it's okay to keep everything in order, in the same order, because sometimes you switch teams, sometimes you work on another project, and it's easier for you to get on board to the project. And it's also easier for new joiners to get on board. Every test project is the same way, and once they learn one, they can jump onto the next microservices and test, and they will know, they will find what they need in the same place. And there's been a couple of times where developers were given, like, you need to write tests for this because we're backed up and we can't really take it. Thank you. Of course, it's not all fun and games. We had a few bad decisions along the way. Who would have thought? By having this library, first of all, the library itself could have bugs, right? It's just another product. It's just another code. And we found ourselves sometimes in a position where the code that we actually wrote for that library had bugs. And it wasn't us that discovered it, but other teams, because maybe we didn't use the feature in our test. And also, this was a funny story. We had to test some matching, like there's a process in gambling, it's called Know Your Customer, where you have to submit, like, for banking and whatnot, your proof of identity. And we were supposed to match customer data, right? First name, last name, in our system. We did perfect on automation, automated 100% of the scenarios, then went into production, and what do you know, matching rates were like 5%. I'm like, what the hell are we doing wrong? We didn't use uppercase, lowercase. We matched, I created a user, I said, user.firstname matches user.firstname. Matched every time, right? But you know, the information that came from the third-party provider that we were using, you know, were in different cases than what we had in our system, and they didn't match. So that's one for you. Also, it's not a magic bullet. Like, we've started this, as I've said before, for backend services, right? For APIs, for microservices. And it came to time to use that in Selenium projects, like we're all talking now. Well, it didn't really go up the way we hoped. We automated the hell out of the backend ones. They run in parallel, everything was fine. And then you came to Selenium and you're like, okay, now I have to write defensive code because that button didn't click, and now my automation is failing, but I ran all this automation, and it's one test, and I have to retry it again. And it's not a replacement for what you do in your manual test or for other types of testing anyway. And you can't use this library and go and say, you know, as you go, oh, I've tested everything on front end, but what about usability? What about, yeah, you can click the button, but is it, you know, in the right place on the page? And some ugly things along the way. We actually designed it badly, the library, at the first time. We thought we were the only ones who were going to use it, and we designed it according to our requirements. We were POs and developers and testers all on the same time. But then we started having other teams use it, and they were like, oh, but this doesn't work, and then if I do this, then I'll have to refactor the whole test. And actually, we had to go through like a big redesign when we actually had to do, I think there were like 10 or 11 teams that were using it, and we had to do breaking changes to the library just to have a redesign that was more in line and to be able to extend it more, and they hated us, man. Nobody wanted to upgrade. We had to go to their managers and plead our case and say, well, if you don't upgrade, you're not going to get the new features. And it was like, I was putting the salesperson hat and going to sell this. And we learned that if we, you know, had spent time earlier to actually think about other people using it, we might have, you know, not gotten through this. Also, as most people, I think you've experienced it in your life, that in automation, sometimes effort is underestimated. You know, maybe there's this case where you say, oh, you have to integrate with a third-party provider and have the response and do whatever, right? Okay, so the Java guys just call an API, they treat the errors, they return it, there you go. I've implemented the story. And then you say, well, I have to do a week's automation on it because we have no test environment, so I have to build a mock. Then that mock has to return all the error codes in the same way the third-party provider has to return the error codes. And then I have to actually instrument the mock, and then call the service to actually see if that's working. And at the start, nobody was believing you. Oh, no, don't worry about it. You just need, like, if, there, and no, you actually have to spend time on instrumenting all this automation before actually arriving to test it. So, I've said it, right? We've started this 6 years ago. And now, only the team in Romania has gotten larger. We have offices in Porto, in Dublin, in London, who have started to use this library. 30+ teams are using it now. The good thing is that they are using it and they're always up to date. And it's always kept up to date, and they always have like the newest ways to create an account. And if something has changed, they don't have like legacy code that creates an old account and then on production it doesn't work. The bad thing about it is that like the they don't have the knowledge, and I think that's bad on the team who actually owns now this library, is that we haven't actually passed on the knowledge on how it was created. Because you see on the Slack channel where we all gather, like, the toolkit is not working. And it's actually an underlying services. You can see from the error that's in the underlying service that has given some error. And I was like, the toolkit is just a layer on top of things. It can't not work. It's something else that's not working. And people don't really know this, think that this is this magical thing that does something. They don't know the history on how it was created, why it was created, that they can contribute. And we haven't actually, I think, spread the word as much as we could. There are still, like, probably, at least in our office, up to 30 people who contribute to it, but I'd like to get that across all offices to say, okay, this is actually the code. You can look at it, you can contribute to it. It's not some magic thing somewhere that nobody has seen that does magic things that we don't know how to use. As I've said, everyone can contribute. The reality of it is that not everyone does. We do have a core group that still maintains it, and they do releases of it and kind of major releases probably every couple of months, or if something major comes up, like would be Sweden now, so you would do a major release for Sweden to say, okay, I've included features to create Swedish accounts, like at the drop of the button, just do java.create Swedish account, and you don't need, if you don't need anything, like creating specific data, like first name, last name, I'm just giving some random examples, then you can create one by default if you just need an account ID. You don't need to know how it's going to be done. And they're maintaining it, and they're doing minor releases, probably every couple of weeks. And one of the other good things was that someone in UI thought, well, let's design like a UI tool on top of it to allow people from other departments, like POs, commercial, and whatnot, who don't know automation, to create their accounts. Like you could select, I want to create the account in the integration environment to be in this currency with this username, or randomly generated with this password, and just create. Of course, it's plug and play onto this one, but it's really useful for them to actually be able to not having to request users from testers, but actually having to go there and, okay, I'm clicking it, I'm generating it, whatever environment I want, except production, and just, it creates it. Yeah. So we've learned really very valuable lessons along the way. One of the core things I like to point out is this: never be afraid to ask for help. Like, go to your developers and say, listen, we have this problem. It's not my problem. It's not something I'm taking home with me. It's our problem. Let's see if we can find creative ways of solving it. Maybe it's not the way you were used to, but maybe they can offer something and you can work together. That's it. And involve the whole team. I mean, that separate automation team was a bust. And now that everyone knows how to contribute and everyone is aware of, okay, if we do this feature, maybe I would need to upgrade the toolkit, right? And I need to spend time on our tests to actually upgrade to the latest version. It may be things like I'm just bumping the version number, or it may be that I need to write some code to actually do it. And they understand there's an effort involved in keeping that up, and it's beneficial for everyone to have that. And as I've said, just spend some time and think, and maybe don't do as we did, but bring out some other perspectives from other teams. Because something that might have fixed problems 100% fixed other people's problems probably 80. We wanted to get to 100. I'm sure it's not like everyone's going to find this like the holy grail and everything, but we could have saved some time by actually involving people right from the start. And that's it from me. Thank you so much. We do have time for a couple of questions, and I'll give the floor to you. Don't be shy, please. There's one in the front.
Hi, one of the challenges we're facing is when we do code reviews, we don't have enough automation developers, so we have regular developers do them. I was wondering how you handle code reviews in your environment.
So usually for code reviews in our tests, usually it's just testers to testers, but I don't see why a developer couldn't be involved in the code reviews. Like for example, currently I have 3 teams, and the third team that got added, actually everyone is doing all the code reviews. So testers are participating in developer code reviews, and developers are participating in tester code reviews. And that seems to work for them. For my other teams, it's just they do on the same level. So developers for developers and testers for testers. But like, I think whatever works for everyone. And you're welcome. Anyone else?
I just want to know, how did you justify return on investment? Was there any metrics or anything that you tracked on that to show your management?
Well, I think on that perspective, we were a bit lucky that at least the senior management in Romania was kind of, we bought them into the idea. But at first, we kind of kept it to ourselves, like we didn't go and advertise it too much. We just talked to our immediate manager and said, okay, we need to do that. I'm saying it's not going to affect the time I spend on the project, but if we do this, we're gonna save time later. And we were lucky in that way that our manager allowed us for time in our sprint to actually do it. When it came to upper management, I think mostly what spoke for itself was the way the tests ran in the continuous delivery pipeline, which were really fast, and the way that it was really visible that our release cycles got really shorter. I never pulled numbers to show to anyone, but that's what I would have pulled if I had to, like the fact that, okay, it took us 1 month to release this project. Now it takes us, we can release it every week, and it takes us an hour. So that's something that I would have pulled to ask the managers. I think working as we do for our own project, so we don't do outsource, it's easier to justify, in a way, some of the costs that you would do in outsourcing, because then you would need to bill it to one particular client and try and sell that. And that would have been my main selling point, like just having it done faster, and that would translate probably into revenue from your customers that you could pull from commercial data.
All right, there it is. All right. Sorry, we're going to actually cut off a couple minutes early. The other track is already cleared, so we want to start to move people around, right?
Yeah, so if you have any other questions, then you can reach out to me after we're done, or I'm having office hours at 5:40.
Got it. Great.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. Can we go back to the holding slides?